Mort.
Please pray with me. Eternal and Almighty God, we began this day, and it seemed the heavens were weeping as we paid our farewell to your servant, Ronald Reagan. We eulogized him. We worshipped under the arches of that stately cathedral. We have come from sea to shining sea, to this soil which he loved so much, and where his body will remain. Gracious Lord God, turn our tears of sorrow into the hope of the resurrection. Comfort our hearts, and especially the Reagan family and the nation, for we celebrate his life, and we do it through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Good evening. I'm Mike Reagan. You knew my father as governor, as president, but I knew him as dad. I want to tell you a little bit about my dad, a little bit about Cameron and Ashley's grandfather, because not a whole lot is ever spoken about that side of Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan adopted me into his family in 1945. I was the chosen one. I was the lucky one. In all of his years, he never mentioned that I was adopted, either behind my back or in front of me. I was his son, Michael Edward Reagan. When his families grew to be two families, he didn't walk away from the one to go to the other, but he became a father to both, to Patty and then Ronnie, but always to Maureen, my sister, and myself. We look forward to those Saturday mornings when he would pick us up, sitting on the curb on Beverly Glen as his car would turn the corner from Sunset Boulevard, and we would get in and ride to the ranch and play games, and he would always make sure it ended up a tie. We would swim and we would ride horses, or we'd just watch him cut firewood. We would be in awe of our father. As years went by and I became older and found a woman I would marry, Colleen, he sent me a letter about marriage and how important it was to be faithful to the woman you love. With a P.S., you'll never get in trouble if you say I love you at least once a day. And I'm sure he told Nancy every day, I love you, as I tell Colleen. He also sent letters to his grandchildren. He wasn't able to be the grandfather that many of you are able to be because of the job that he had. And so he would write letters. He sent one letter to Cameron, said, Cameron, some guy got $10,000 for my signature. Maybe this letter will help you pay for your college education. And then he signed it, Grandpa, P.S., your grandpa is the 40th president of the United States, Ronald Reagan. He just signed his sign. Those are the kinds of things my father did. At the early onset of Alzheimer's disease, my father and I would tell each other we loved each other and we'd give each other a hug. As the years went by and he could no longer verbalize my name, he recognized me as the man who hugged him. And so when I would walk into the house, he would be there in his chair, opening up his arms for that hug, hello, and the hug goodbye. It was a blessing truly brought on by God. We had wonderful blessings of that nature. Wonderful, wonderful blessings that my father gave to me each and every day of my life. I was so proud to have the Reagan name and to be Ronald Reagan's son. What a great honor. He gave me a lot of gifts as a child. Gave me a horse, gave me a car, gave me a lot of things. But there's a gift he gave me that I think is wonderful for every father to give every son. Last Saturday, when my father opened his eyes for the last time and visualized Nancy and gave her such a wonderful, wonderful gift, when he closed his eyes, that's when I realized the gift that he gave to me. The gift that he was going to be with his Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. He had back in 1988 on a flight from Washington, D.C. to Point Mugu told me about his love of God, his love of Christ as his Savior. I didn't know then what it all meant, but I certainly know now. I can't think of a better gift for a father to give a son. And I hope to honor my father by giving my son Cameron and my daughter Ashley that very same gift he gave to me, knowing where he is this very moment, this very day, that he is in heaven. And I can only promise my father this: Dad, when I go, I will go to heaven too. And you and I, and my sister Maureen that went before us, we will dance with the heavenly host of angels before the presence of God. We will do it, melanoma and Alzheimer's free. Thank you for letting me share. My father, Ronald Wilson Reagan.
Many years ago, my father decided to write down his reflections about death, specifically his own, and how he would want people to feel about it. He chose to write down the first verse of an Alfred Lord Tennyson poem, Crossing the Bar, and then he decided to add a couple of lines of his own. I don't think Tennyson will mind. In fact, they've probably already discussed it by now. Tennyson wrote, "Sunset and evening star, and one clear call for me. And may there be no moaning of the bar when I put out to sea." My father added, "We have God's promise that I have gone on to a better world where there is no pain or sorrow. Bring comfort to those who may mourn my going." My father never feared death. He never saw it as an ending. When I was a child, he took me out into a field at our ranch after one of the Malibu fires had swept through. I was very small and the field looked huge and lifeless, but he bent down and showed me how tiny new green shoots were peeking up out of the ashes just weeks after the fire had come through. "You see," he said, "new life always comes out of death. It looks like nothing could ever grow in this field again, but things do." He was the one who generously offered funeral services for my goldfish on the morning of its demise. We went out into the garden and we dug a tiny grave with a teaspoon, and he took 2 twigs and lashed them together with twine and formed a cross as a marker for the grave. And then he gave a beautiful eulogy. He told me that my fish was swimming in the clear blue waters in heaven, and he would never tire, and he would never get hungry, and he would never be in any danger. And he could swim as far and wide as he wanted, and he never had to stop because the river went on forever. He was free. When we went back inside and I looked at my remaining goldfish in their aquarium with their pink plastic castle and their colored rocks, I suggested that perhaps we should kill the others so they could also go to that clear blue river and be free. He then took more time out of his morning, I'm sure he actually did have other things to do that day, and patiently explained to me that in God's time, the other fish would go there as well. In God's time, we would all be taken home. And even though it sometimes seemed a mystery, we were just asked to trust that God's time was right and wise. I don't know why Alzheimer's was allowed to steal so much of my father, before releasing him into the arms of death. But I know that at his last moment, when he opened his eyes that had not opened for many, many days, and looked at my mother, he showed us that neither disease nor death can conquer love. He may have, in his lifetime, come across a small book called Peace of Mind by Joshua Loth Liebman. If he did, I think he would have been struck by these lines. Then for each one of us, the moment comes when the great nurse, death, takes man, the child, by the hand and quietly says, "It's time to go home. Night is coming. It is your bedtime, child of earth."
He is home now. He is free. In his final letter to the American people, Dad wrote, "I now begin the journey that will lead me into the sunset of my life. This evening, he has arrived. History will record his worth as a leader. We here have long since measured his worth as a man. Honest, compassionate, graceful, brave. He was the most plainly decent man you could ever hope to meet. He used to say, a gentleman always does the kind thing. And he was a gentleman in the truest sense of the word, a gentle man. Big as he was, he never tried to make anyone feel small. Powerful as he became, he never took advantage of those who were weaker. Strength, he believed, was never more admirable than when it was applied with restraint. Shopkeeper, doorman, king or queen, it made no difference. Dad treated everyone with the same unfailing courtesy, acknowledging the innate dignity in us all. The idea that all people are created equal was more than mere words on a page. It was how he lived his life. And he lived a good, long life. The kind of life good men lead. But I guess I'm just telling you things you already know. Here's something you may not know. Little Ronald Reagan trivia for you. His entire life, Dad had an inordinate fondness for earlobes. Even as a boy, back in Dixon, Illinois, hanging out on a street corner with his friends, they knew that if they were standing next to Dutch, sooner or later, he was going to reach over and grab a hold of their lobe, give it a workup. There, sitting on his lap watching TV as a kid, same story. He'd have a hold of my earlobe. I'm surprised I have any lobes left after all of that. And you didn't have to be a kid to enjoy that sort of treatment. Serving in the Screen Actors Guild with his great friend, William Holden, the actor, best man at his wedding. Well, Bill got used to it. They'd be there at the meetings, and Dad'd have a hold of his earlobe. There they'd be, some tense labor negotiation, two big Hollywood movie stars, hand in earlobe. He was, as you know, a famously optimistic man. Sometimes such optimism leads you to see the world as you wish it were, as opposed to how it really is. At a certain point in his presidency, Dad decided he was going to revive the thumbs up gesture. So he went all over the country, of course, giving everybody the thumbs up. Dory and I found ourselves in the presidential limousine one day, returning from some big event. My mother was there, and Dad was, of course, thumbs-upping the crowd along the way. And suddenly, looming in the window, on his side of the car, was this snarling face. This fellow was reviving an entirely different hand gesture and hoisted an entirely different digit in our direction. Dad saw this and, without missing a beat, turned to us and said, "You see, I think it's catching on." Dad was also a deeply, unabashedly religious man. But he never made the fatal mistake of so many politicians, wearing his faith on his sleeve to gain political advantage. True, after he was shot and nearly killed early in his presidency, he came to believe that God had spared him in order that he might do good. But he accepted that as a responsibility, not a mandate. And there is a profound difference. Humble as he was, he never would have assumed a free pass to heaven, but in his heart of hearts, I suspect he felt he would be welcome there. And so he is home. He is free. Those of us who knew him well will have no trouble imagining his paradise. Golden fields will spread beneath the blue dome of a western sky. Live oaks will shadow the rolling hillsides. And someplace, flowing from years long past, a river will wind towards the sea. Across those fields, he will ride a gray mare he calls Nancy D. They will sail over jumps he has built with his own hands. He will let the river carry him over the shining stones. He will rest in the shade of the trees. Our cares are no longer his. We meet him now only in memory, but we will join him soon enough, all of us, when we are home, when we are free.
The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever.
Hard time. Bears, hold. Ready, step. Hard time. Bears, hold. Center, stay. There, down. Bears. Up. On left. Up. On left. Eight. Forward. Forward. Up. Third. Halt. Ready. Set. Hold. Third. Down.
Hold, third. Hold. Hold, right. Hush.
Mrs. Reagan, members of the Reagan family, distinguished and honored guests, it is a wonderful, awesome responsibility for me to be able to give these final parting words on this long journey of this week of sadness. I want to thank you for the privilege of being your pastor and chaplain to the President. Little did I think that 4.5 decades ago, when Frida and I came to this country to study in college, that one day I would end up as the chaplain to the President of the United States, only in America. Dear Nancy, thank you for bearing your grief so nobly. Thank you for the dignity that you have shown this week. Our hearts have gone out to you. So many people have commented on the picture where you and I are together as we began this week. And I think the reason for its poignancy was that the whole American nation was putting its arm around you. And so we love you and care for you. Thank you for caring for the President in his declining years. Thank you for the wonderful example of your marriage that you modeled throughout your life together, and especially in the White House years. Yours was truly a glorious friendship based on mutual love and respect, and we love you for it, and thank you for it. To you, Michael, and Patty, and Ron, thank you for those very, very touching and moving words. A little humor, but the heartfelt love of children who love their father and respect him so much. We gathered at the beginning of this long day in the National Cathedral and heard so many wonderful words from the nation's leaders and also from a beloved friend. I have never heard Lady Margaret Thatcher speak more eloquently in all her life. The last time when I heard her speak, I had the privilege of being present as she was awarded the Ronald Reagan Freedom Award. And I remember her saying particularly, when Ronnie spoke about the Soviet Union as the evil empire, even I blanched. Thank God that neither she nor your husband shirked in the face of communism, but saw its demise. He touched us all. When I went back to the land where I was born in South Africa, I went to see my aging father. And as I sat in his study, he pointed to a huge picture behind me framed. It was of your husband. And he said, "This is my president." 10,000 miles away, he identified, as we all do and shall do through time to come. It now remains for me to talk about the man and his faith. Indeed, he was a gift from God to us all. He made us feel good and confident about ourselves, about our country, and about our future. And I believe it's because he gained his confidence from the psalm which I read at the beginning of this week, Psalm 46, where the psalmist says, God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in the time of trouble. When you attended church, so many people noticed that he could sing the hymns without looking at the hymnal. He loved hymns. And it was appropriate that it was sung in the cathedral this morning and played on the bagpipes this evening. That hymn speaks about God's amazing grace. And Ronald Reagan knew of the grace of his Lord Jesus Christ, for he lived with and on and in that grace. I think of that one particular stanza of that hymn which says, through many dangers, toils and snares, I have already come. 'Tis grace hath brought me safe thus far, and grace will lead me home. Grace has led him home this day. He was a man who exhibited graciousness with all that he met, from the highest in the land to the lowliest. On one occasion, when Alzheimer's was beginning to rob that beautiful mind, and he no longer came to Bel Air Presbyterian Church, you know that I came to the office regularly and brought the church to him and then to your home. And on one occasion, his secretary said, "Mr. President, your pastor is here. Come and sit in the corner of his office." And he said, "No, I think I'll just sit here at the desk." I looked at her, she looked at me. We knew he wasn't going to budge. So I sidled up and sat on the edge of the desk, and I said, "Mr. President, you're still boss. I'll sit where you are." And so I read scripture and prayed. Shortly afterwards, his secretary ushered in my wife, and he stood up immediately and went over to her and shook her hand. You see, the gentleness, the kindness, the love, the gifts, the fruit of the Holy Spirit was deeply embedded in his DNA. As Ron has already said, in 1994, he wrote that letter saying, "I now begin my journey into the sunset of my life." But I believe that last Saturday, he began a new journey into the glorious presence of Almighty God. And he is basking in the sunshine of his love. And I believe he's touching the face of God, as he said during the Challenger disaster. And the Lord is saying to him, "Well done, my good and faithful servant." Let me close with just one thought. In the ancient nation of Israel, when the temple had been built, the Lord appeared to King Solomon and said to him these words, "If my people who are called by my name humble themselves and turn from their wicked ways and pray and seek my face, I will hear from heaven and forgive their sin and heal their land." God was reminding his ancient people that the glory of the nation was not in power or prestige, in wealth or in might. Ronald Reagan knew that as a cardinal truth, that ultimately our strength is not in our might, but it is as we depend upon Almighty God and trust in him and walk humbly before God. Ronald Reagan lived and believed that, and thank God that he did. Mr. President, I salute you.
Thank you.
Gun 3, stand by. 5. Gun 4, stand by. 5. Gun 1, stand by. 5. Gun 2, stand by. 5. Gun 3, stand by. 5. Gun 4, stand by. 5. Gun 1, Stand by! Fire!
Please pray with me. Now, eternal God, we commend into your hands the spirit of your servant, Ronald Wilson Reagan. We commend him into your care and keeping, and as we do so, we commit ourselves afresh into your love and care. Teach us to so live that we shall never, ever be afraid of death, nor ever ashamed to see you face to face. But grant that your love and peace may rest with us now and always. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. The Lord lift up the light of his countenance upon you and grant you his peace, now and forevermore. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Late is better than early. Spin it.
Stand by. Ready. Ready. Aim. Fire. Ready. Aim. Fire. Ready. Aim. Fire. Ready. Freeze and boom.
A little over a minute, guys. About minute 10.
sunset in Southern California. The president's wish to be buried at sunset at the site of his library overlooking the valley he loved, Simi Valley, California. And this service comes to an end. And so will our portion of the program, but I want to get some comments from some of the guests. Ed Meese, what did you think of what you just saw?
I thought it was a marvelous ending to a very spectacular tribute to the president, and having his children there give those heartfelt remarks, as well as having the entire ceremony there with the sunset and all, was the proper close for what he would have liked and what is really appropriate in ending this chapter in our history of our country. I also think that the military presence throughout the events of the week is very important to Ronald Reagan. He was a military man himself, as you know, having been an officer during World War II, and that, combined with all the other aspects of this tribute, I think is a very fitting memorial to him.
Beautifully said. President Gorbachev, what is your reflection on this evening?
In 1992, I visited with Ronald Reagan and Nancy at the Reagan Library. I spoke there, gave a talk there, and I also had a tour of the library. And at the end of that tour, Ronald Reagan said, "Mikhail, I want to show you the place where we will be buried." But then he said, "I'm in no hurry."
And Wolf Blitzer, what are your thoughts on what you saw here tonight?
Well, you know, my thoughts are with Nancy Reagan right now, Larry. She had been so stoic, so brave, so composed throughout this week. Only at the very end, when they took that American flag off the coffin and she went up there, did we see her really break down. Understandably so. This is the last time she's going to even be that close to her husband, Ronnie, who she called him Ronnie. She loved him so very much. And I was touched by the fact that her children came up behind her as soon as they saw her begin to lose it a little bit. This is a powerful woman, Larry. As you point out, she may be frail, but she's very, very strong.
Ed Meese, were you surprised that she finally did break down?
No, not really. She's been a strong person, as Wolf said. She is a strong person, but this emotional moment, I think her reaction was what we might expect, and we can sympathize with her.
Wolf, I guess it might tie in together. You couldn't have Hollywood scripted this better.
This was about as perfect a scene as Larry, as you can imagine. What a fitting ending to Ronald Reagan, 93 years old, the 40th president of the United States, literally fading into the sunset of the Pacific right now. What a spectacular moment.
Ed Meese, I know you know this scene very well. Spent a lot of time in California. I don't want to sound like a overly done loving Californian, but can't beat the sunsets.
No, you certainly can't, and Ronald Reagan loved those sunsets, whether they were at the ranch or whether they were here at the library, and I agree with Wolf. This is a most fitting way to end the day and to memorialize the life of one of our greatest presidents.
There you see the sun fading in the distance at about 1 minute before 8 o'clock Pacific Coast time. This long day started back in Washington, D.C. many hours ago with that incredible service at the National Cathedral, and ends tonight here at the Reagan Library in Simi Valley, California, as all of the 700 guests get to go by and give their last goodbyes to the 40th President of the United States. One of those, of course, the former Prime Minister of Great Britain, Lady Margaret Thatcher. Sun is now a memory. Cars are beginning to leave behind us. The motorcade with Nancy Reagan now leaves. Governor Schwarzenegger and Maria Shriver pay their last respects. Nancy heads back home to the Reagan home in Bel Air, California. About a 1-hour drive. And this service comes to its conclusion. We've been here for the past 3 hours and covering this, and we now turn it over to Aaron Brown, who is in Washington, D.C., to give us a special edition of Newsnight. Aaron, this was, I don't know if you got to watch much of this, but this was quite an evening.
Well, Larry, we saw it all. Thank you. We awoke today on a drizzly day in Washington, which felt oddly perfect for what was in store. And the night ended in a glorious sunset across the Pacific, and that too seemed exactly right. The program tonight is not our usual fare, not in tone or substance, not in length or in structure. For those of you who missed the nation's farewell to the president this morning, we hope you'll stay with us over the next hour or so, and you will see what millions of others watched throughout the day. For those of you who watched so much of it this day with us, we hope you'll watch it again, seeing some things you missed earlier. There are some still photos to show you, a few friends of Mr. Reagan's to talk to, a song that seemed perfect for the moment to play, a perfect ending of our program. We even eliminated the crawl. So tonight, a different Newsnight, but Newsnight still, and it begins at the beginning of a day of long goodbyes. The nation's first state funeral in more than 3 decades began simply with a gentle kiss.
faith in Jesus Christ, we receive the body of our brother Ronald for burial. Let us pray with confidence to God, the giver of life, that he will raise him to perfection in the company of the saints.
Inside the National Cathedral, in front of all of the country's living ex-presidents, and with the world watching, the final chapters of Ronald Reagan's long goodbye began in prayer.
For none of us liveth to himself, and no man dieth to himself. For if we live unto the Lord, and if we die unto the Lord. Whether we live, therefore, or die, we are the Lord's. Blessed are the dead who die in the Lord, even so saith the Spirit, for they rest from their labors.
There's hope.
Let us pray. O God, whose mercies cannot be numbered, accept our prayers on behalf of thy servant Ronald, and grant him an entrance into the land of light and joy.
Even youths shall faint and be weary, and the young men shall utterly fail. But they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not feel faint.
They spoke of history changed, words spoken by some who helped change it. Margaret Thatcher, frail now, spoke her words on tape.
He inspired America and its allies with renewed faith in their mission of freedom. Others saw only limits to growth. He transformed a stagnant economy into an engine of opportunity. Others hoped at best for an uneasy cohabitation with the Soviet Union. He won the Cold War, not only without firing a shot, but also by inviting enemies out of their fortress and turning them into friends.
One day, in Brussels, President Mitterrand, in referring to President Reagan, said, "Il a vraiment la notion de l'État." Rough translation, he really has a sense of the state about him. The translation does not fully capture the profundity of the observation. What President Mitterrand meant is that there is a vast difference between the job of president and the role of president.
President Bush the elder was never better, balancing a nation's sorrow with great good humor.
As his vice president for 8 years, I learned more from Ronald Reagan than from anyone I encountered in all my years of public life. I learned kindness. We all did. I also learned courage. The nation did. Who can forget the horrible day in March 1981? He looked at the doctors in the emergency room and said, "I hope you're all Republicans." And then I learned decency. The whole world did. Days after being shot, weak from wounds, he spilled water from a sink. And entering the hospital room, aides saw him on his hands and knees, wiping water from the floor. He worried that his nurse would get in trouble. The good book says humility goes before honor, and our friend had both. And who could not cherish such a man? And perhaps as important as anything, I learned a lot about humor, a lot about laughter. And oh, how President Reagan loved a good story. When asked, "How did your visit go with Bishop Tutu?" he replied, "So-so."
And his son spoke of a nation's loss.
In his last years, he saw through a glass darkly. Now he sees his Savior face to face. And we look for that fine day when we will see him again. All weariness gone, clear of mind, strong and sure and smiling again. And the sorrow of this parting gone forever. May God bless Ronald Reagan and the country he loved.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound.
On any day, Ronan Tynan's Amazing Grace touches your soul. Today it seemed to touch something even deeper.
I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see.
The minister, friend, former Senator John Danforth.
In this service of worship, we celebrate the life of a great president, and we profess the resurrection faith of this church. It is faith in God's victory over darkness. It is faith in the ultimate triumph of light. We believe in this victory every day of our lives. We believe it as individuals. We believe it as a nation. There is no better time to celebrate the triumph of light than in a service for Ronald Reagan.
And then Ronald Wilson Reagan, a child of small-town America, left the city where he made history. Left for his last trip west. He was, as the Air Force band played, going home. That was this morning in Washington. We'll return in California in a moment. Every culture, at least every culture I know of throughout time, has had funerals. They help us make the difficult transition from life to death and beyond. That is no different when they're big, state, formal funerals like the ones we've watched over the last several days. CNN's Candy Crowley was in Simi Valley during the service, and Candy joins us now from there. Good evening. It was moving and perfect in so many different ways, wasn't it?
It really was, and so different from what we saw in Washington. The National Cathedral, as lovely as that was, and as beautiful a man-made structure as that is, it's just nothing for these mountains and the sunset and this perfectly clear night. I wanted to try and give you an idea of a couple things our viewers might not have seen while this was, while the camera was elsewhere. One is, it was so quiet here. I don't think I heard a cough. I don't think I heard a whisper. At one point, I looked at my producer and said, "Do you hear that dove?" I mean, that's how quiet it was. When the camera started to click, it sounded like thunderbolts. I mean, they just really broke the silence. As you may have noticed, the motorcade was very late compared to when it was supposed to be here. It arrived some 45 minutes late, I think, partially because they slowed down so that the crowds that were along the way could get a good look at the hearse and the funeral procession. And what that meant was that here, these people sat and didn't seem to talk to one another, maybe a whisper or so, but very quietly, and up above you kept hearing those F-18s that did the flyby during the funeral itself. Just a lonely F-18s up there. So there were just lots of imagery, beautiful setting. I judge probably precisely what Ronald Reagan had in mind when he said, "I want to be buried right here and I want to be facing west." We had, when the flag draped coffin came and they put it up against those kind of sun dappled mountains. It was incredible coloring. Hollywood could not have done it any better. It was an amazing night, and I think the most personal of the times we've seen. We heard from the three children, and it was very clear at the end when you saw Nancy Reagan with the casket, and she went over to it for the last time. You know, very hard for her to back away from that. Her children came over and whispered in her ear, or were clearly trying to get her to move back, but that took a little while. This really was the last goodbye.
Just a thought. Mr. Reagan and Mrs. Reagan planned every detail of this and had planned it for a long time. The one thing they couldn't have planned, but that turned out, is that their family, which was often had difficult estrangements over the years, in the last years of his life, and as we all saw today, was very much together, of good spirit. I thought the children particularly were quite lovely in the things they had to say, in their grace and in their humor and in their obvious love for their father. It's been a long road for the family to get to this point, but in the most important moment, they were there.
Yes, and the family itself attributes this to the disease, Alzheimer's. As awful as that was, it has a way of bringing life into perspective. And what seems so important, obviously, when you're faced with that kind of debilitating disease, time has run out. And they say this is when the children and their father found some peace with one another when that started. And certainly that was evident tonight. Very gracious children of Ronald Reagan. They seem to have learned a lot from him.
Candy, thank you very much. It was, I think for people who watched it, it was everything you wanted it to be, and wonderfully played out, if you will, quietly and with great dignity. Thank you for your work tonight, Candy Crowley in California. In the last 48 hours, we've seen this remarkable, and for Americans at least, unusual public image play out. In the time remaining with us, we'll stop and watch and listen again as some of these moments unfolded. We'll also look a little more at Mr. Reagan's life. He was a letter writer. He wrote hundreds of them, thousands of them, and we'll talk some about that as well. And we'll end it all tonight with the perfect marriage of a moment. Ray Charles, who died yesterday, and Ronald Reagan, whose funeral was today, together. This is Newsnight from New York.
As his vice president for 8 years, I learned more from Ronald Reagan than from anyone I encountered in all my years of public life.
George H.W. Bush will turn 80 this weekend, I believe. Americans first met Ronald Reagan at the movies, where he was larger than life moving across the screen. The week that honored his death was itself an exercise in motion, from takeoffs and landings on opposite coasts to parades of people paying respects to riderless horse clip-clopping to the Capitol steps, a blur of action, really. So tonight, for a moment or two, we'll slow it down, stop it, actually, and let still photographs do what they do best, with thanks to the photographers of the Associated Press who captured them all.
We have come this day to begin the preparation of our final respects. We thank you that this world is a better place because he was here. The legacy that he left behind and set a path for the American future. It's something that's going to affect my life and everyone else's, so it's good to be a part of that.
God bless you, Nancy.
This Capitol building is, for many, the greatest symbol of democracy and freedom in the world. It is the right place to honor a man who so faithfully defended our freedom and so successfully helped extend the blessings of liberty to millions of people around the world.
With faith in Jesus Christ, we receive the body of our brother Ronald for burial. Let us pray with confidence to God, the giver of life, that he will raise him to perfection in the company of the saints.
He is himself again, more himself than at any time on this earth. And as the last journey of this faithful pilgrim took him beyond the sunset, and as heaven's morning broke, I like to think, in the words of Bunyan, that all the trumpets sounded on the other side.
As his vice president for 8 years, I learned more from Ronald Reagan than from anyone I encountered in all my years of public life. I learned kindness. We all did. I also learned courage. The nation did.
It has been 10 years since he said his own farewell, yet it is still very sad and hard to let him go. When the sun sets tonight off the coast of California, and we lay to rest our 40th president, a great American story will close.
He is home now. He is free. In his final letter to the American people, Dad wrote, "I now begin the journey that will lead me into the sunset of my life. This evening, he has arrived."
The photographs of the Associated Press and the elegant work of Newsnight producer Amanda Townsend. Next on Newsnight, how Mrs. Reagan honored his life and his death at sunset in California. Around the world, this is Newsnight. For Ronald Reagan's family, today began with high pageantry and ended on a California hilltop where days ago nearly 100,000 people had come to pay their respects. There were no crowds today, just invited guests. President Reagan had come home for the last time, and it was time for the private goodbyes.
We have come from sea to shining sea, to this soil which he loved so much, and where his body will remain.
He sent me a letter about marriage and how important it was to be faithful to the woman you love. With a P.S., you'll never get in trouble if you say I love you at least once a day. And I'm sure he told Nancy every day, I love you.
At his last moment, when he opened his eyes that had not opened for many, many days, and looked at my mother, he showed us that neither disease nor death can conquer love.
Those of us who knew him well will have no trouble imagining his paradise. Golden fields will spread beneath the blue dome of a western sky. Live oaks will shadow the rolling hillsides. And someplace, flowing from years long past, a river will wind towards the sea. Across those fields, he will ride a gray mare he calls Nancy D. They will sail over jumps he has built with his own hands. He will let the river carry him over the shining stones. He will rest in the shade of the trees. Our cares are no longer his. We meet him now only in memory, but we will join him soon enough, all of us, when we are home, when we are free.
Ready, aim, fire! Ready, aim, fire! Ready, aim, fire!
The California chapter of today's story, Mrs. Reagan, who is 82, perhaps 83, obviously showing the strain of a long and difficult week, a week she planned meticulously down to the very last note of the very last song. When we come back, we'll talk history and the president, the 40th president. A quick break here. First, from New York, this is Newsnight. Kevin Starr has written 6 volumes on the life and times and spirit. It's considerable, the state of California. They'd be somewhat slimmer, we imagine, had Ronald Reagan settled in Chicago instead. For years, Elizabeth Drew wrote the letter from Washington for the New Yorker magazine. With Mr. Reagan in the White House, she never lacked for material. And historian Mary Serrati teaches international relations at the University of Cambridge, where she is a fellow at St. John's College. She's also a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, and they all join us now, and we are pleased to have them all with us. I don't think this is a night for especially hard or tricky questions. Let's talk a little sense of history. FDR said of great presidents that they are leaders of thought at times when certain ideas of a nation had to be clarified. Ms. Drew, does that seem to define Ronald Reagan pretty well?
I think it does, Aaron. The striking thing about Ronald Reagan's presidency is he really filled both roles to the fullest, whether one agreed with him or not. He understood the role of the president as head of state. He understood the symbolism of statecraft, of being the head of state. Mike Deaver told me once that before Reagan made any entrance, he would throw his shoulders back. He understood how to be and appear to be a leader. He was also a very good and shrewd politician. But most of all, Reagan was a revolutionary. He, like his compatriots, that was so striking today, Mr. Gorbachev and Mrs. Thatcher, were visionaries, even revolutionaries, and they all remade the world that they inherited.
Do you think it's too early to talk about how history will write the story? But is he in that category of great, do you think, Mary?
I think that he is, although obviously we buried the man today. You don't want to speak ill of the dead. Today is a day to think about his accomplishments. I think the audit of history will be more critical than the coverage we've seen recently.
It'll certainly be more complex. There's a difference between beloved, which clearly he was, and greatness, which is a much more complicated matter.
Absolutely. This president is, as we've seen in this week, beloved as few have been. I don't think that will ever change his standing with the American people. What will come out when the grieving is past is a more critical assessment of the deficits, foreign policy. But today is not a day really to talk about those topics.
I agree. Kevin, out in California, were there times as the governor of California where was he a different leader in those times than he became when he became president, or were all the markers there even then?
Well, of course, the governor has a more narrow base than the president of the United States, but even from the beginning, Ronald Reagan, once he adopted a kind of laissez-faire republicanism, the republicanism of Southern California, a suburban republicanism, if you will, that had a laissez-faire attitude towards a lot of questions. He stayed on that message. He stayed on that message that California was good and needed to be corrected. And then, of course, later he stayed on the message that America was good but needed to be corrected. And, of course, later, even beyond as president, that the world had possibilities within it but needed deep correction.
Elizabeth, I think you started to talk about this a moment ago. There is that thing about Mr. Reagan that as the head of state, as the ceremonial head of state, and we embody them both in the American government, the political leadership and the head of state, he had the most perfect pitch I can imagine. He seemed to understand that part as well as any person in our history.
Oh, I think that's right. He understood the Americans' desire for the presidency to be a dignified and even majestic office. He understood symbolism. I think, and this is not at all derogatory, I think his movie career put him in very good stead. He understood that he was playing a role, or as he would have put it, the role of a lifetime.
Yeah.
And he knew how to play that role.
We're getting down to our last seconds. I'm curious, you're the youngest in this group. What did you learn this week that you didn't know before?
What did I learn that I didn't know before?
Do you think you appreciated the depth of feeling that Americans had for the president?
I think I did. I think I saw that. But I also think it becomes clear seeing him in the context of Thatcher and Gorbachev just how much these individuals did change the world.
Yeah.
I think that Reagan completed the work that Truman and Eisenhower started. I think we saw an arc come to completion. And that was, I think, a profoundly satisfying feeling this week.
Are you... You know, we tend to say they don't make them like that anymore. Do you tend to think that way? They don't make them like that anymore? Or are you of the sort that says, we'll just have to see, moments test greatness?
Well, he obviously was a very unique man. Just as Elizabeth was saying, he was an actor. That was very unique. At some points that was used against him, but he said, you know, there are days in this office I wonder how anyone who isn't an actor could do this job. And I think that was a kind of unique statement to Reagan.
Thank all of you for being here and for being flexible with us on a night when things haven't always gone on time. That happens sometimes. We'll invite you all back and we'll continue the conversation. Thank you. Ahead on the program still, he was called the great communicator. We tend to think of that in terms of the speeches that he wrote. But this is a man who literally wrote thousands of letters, and the letters are incredibly revealing. And we'll read a few after the break. They continue to pass by, pay their respects in Simi Valley. We have two more pieces of business we want to get in tonight before we leave you, and this is the first of them. A letter Ronald Reagan wrote, the letter he wrote to the country announcing that he had Alzheimer's, is the one most of us remember. Its poignancy and especially its honesty are still striking a decade later. President Reagan's way with the spoken word earned him the label the great communicator. But pen and paper exerted an irresistible pull on the man. When he took office, email and instant messaging had yet to reshape the way we communicate. Blackberries were found in bushes, not in briefcases. Letters, the kind you post in the mail, still had currency, and Ronald Reagan wrote thousands of them. A good many were published several years ago in a book called Reagan, A Life in Letters.
He wrote to family, to friends, to heads of government, his peers as president. There was no one too big or too small for Ronald Reagan to write to. He didn't waver, and the letters, he took each individual seriously.
In 1982, he wrote this letter to a woman who was suffering financially, and even though she had voted for him, accused him of not thinking about people like her. I wish I could tell you, he wrote, there is some instant answer to the economic problems besetting us, but I can't. However, he said, it is my strong belief that we are on the right track and the economy is looking up.
Reagan reveals himself more in letters than in any other medium. He was great at giving speeches. He's known as the great communicator. He was excellent on radio, on television. But where the best revelations about Reagan, his thinking, his ideas, his life can be found, it's really the letters.
In 1983, the National Conference of Bishops published a letter on war and peace, and President Reagan responded. Reverend Majoros, I can't tell you how much your letter meant to me, he wrote. I'm sure the bishops supporting the freeze and unilateral disarmament are sincere and believe they are furthering the cause of peace. I am equally sure, he wrote, they are tragically mistaken. What they urge would bring us closer to a choice of surrender or die. Surrender, of course, would mean slavery under a system that would banish God. I believe, he wrote, there is another way, the way we call peace through strength, and it leads us away from the possibility of war.
The great thing through the letters is how much, at every phase of his life, Ronald Reagan was in control of what he was doing, of his thoughts, of his policies, of his ideas. But I don't think he felt the need to just defend himself through press conferences on a daily basis.
He expressed this early in his presidency in a letter to his friend John Kohler. I have a foreign policy. I'm working on it, he wrote. I just don't happen to think that it's wise to always stand up and put in quotation marks in front of the world what your foreign policy is. I am a believer, he wrote, in quiet diplomacy. Ronald Reagan was not afraid of taking on his critics.
He would really outline in great detail, walk them through the steps of what he was doing. And he did that elegantly and frequently in letters.
In response to a 1987 editorial critical of the INF Treaty, he wrote, "We haven't weakened Western defense at all. Quite the contrary. They are removing 4 warheads for every one we are taking out. But more importantly, we still have thousands of tactical warheads online."
I think he might have been able to alter the impression that he was somewhat of an empty suit. Had he been as revelatory in public as he was in writing, but I think he was so comfortable in his own skin, and he was so that he didn't feel the need to outline everything that he was doing.
In 1994, Ronald Reagan wrote his goodbye letter to the country, revealing that he had Alzheimer's. We thought of it as the end of his political career, but he didn't.
It's after the 94 election has taken place, and the Republican Party has just won the House of Representatives for the first time in a long time. And 9 days again after Reagan wrote his goodbye letter to the nation, he writes just a brief note.
And this is what he wrote. "Dear Haley," writing to Haley Barbour, the chairman of the Republican Party, "congratulations on the great job from the Republican Party. I couldn't be happier with the results of the election." And he added, "Please don't count me out. I'll be putting in my licks for the Republicans as long as I am able." He wasn't able much longer, and we know little about the 10 years that followed. The letters tell us much about Ronald Reagan, but they cannot tell us much about that. The letters of Ronald Reagan. We'll take a break. When we come back, a goodbye to the president and to another, and to the country. This is Newsmatch. Finally from us tonight, a couple of goodbyes. Lost perhaps a bit in the death of President Reagan was the death yesterday of Ray Charles. Both men giants in very different ways. But take 3 minutes and change and marry their passings together, and you find a tribute fitting to each and to the country that honors them both.
Singing something like this. Listen here. Oh, beautiful, far spacious skies, far amber waves of grain, far purple mountain majesties. But now wait a minute, I'm talking about America, sweet America. You know, God done shed his grace on thee. He crowned our good. Yes, he did. Heavy brotherhood from sea to shining sea. You know, I wish I had somebody to help me sing this.
Work of Midnight producer Marianne Fox. Next week we go back to the normal business of life, of dealing with wars and peace and terror and the economy and campaigns and all the rest. But this week was something special and different, and it was an honor to share it with you each night. Thanks for joining us. Have a wonderful weekend. We'll see you on Monday. Good night for all of us.
It was a far more intimate ceremony that we saw last night to say goodbye to the 40th President of the United States. Perhaps amongst the most touching moments of the 90-minute ceremony was when Captain James Simons, the commander of the USS Ronald Reagan, the aircraft carrier, took the flag that had been draped over the coffin of the former president for most of the week. It had been folded, and he bent down on one knee and handed it to Nancy Reagan, sharing a few words with her as he did that. Also during this ceremony, we heard from some folks that we hadn't heard from all week. Patty Davis, Ronald Reagan's daughter, spoke about her father, remembered him from way back when her goldfish died.
He was the one who generously offered funeral services for my goldfish on the morning of its demise. We went out into the garden and we dug a tiny grave with a teaspoon, and he took 2 twigs and lashed them together with twine and formed a cross as a marker for the grave. And then he gave a beautiful eulogy. He told me that my fish was swimming in the clear blue waters in heaven, and he would never tire, and he would never get hungry, and he would never be in any danger. And he could swim as far and wide as he wanted, and he never had to stop because the river went on forever.
And it's that human touch that person after person remembered about Ronald Reagan, and one last touch of the coffin for Nancy Reagan last night as well. After she had the flag, she approached the coffin, put her hand on it. The flag that she was holding fell on top of it, and she said, "I love you." And then something she hadn't done all week, she wept. Her sons, Ronald Reagan Jr. and her daughter, Patty Davis, came up to her and held her for a short time, and then were able to lead her away from the coffin. And the guests, all 700 of them, took their time to pay their respects to the former president as well. President Reagan now interred in Simi Valley between Los Angeles, his Bel Air home where he lived, and Rancho de Cielo that he made so famous during his presidency, Ranch of the Sky up near Santa Barbara, almost right in between the two, where he will stay. And the sun is rising again over Simi Valley. Toomey?
Miguel, give us a sense of what people are going to be able to do, those who perhaps want to visit the library and pay their last respects once again.
The library is closed through Sunday. It will reopen on Monday for extended hours from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. Pacific time, and then it'll have slightly extended hours for the rest of the week from 10 a.m. till 6 p.m. And then I think that the library will probably make a decision as to whether or not to extend those hours in weeks ahead, depending upon the turnout they have. Toomey?
All right, Miguel Marquez, thank you very much. Well, among the numerous public and private memorials to America's 40th president, Las Vegas dimmed its lights for 3 minutes Friday night following Reagan's sunset service. It was a tribute to the former actor and entertainer who'd been a headliner on the Vegas Strip in the 1950s before moving to the largest stage of politics. In New York, the Empire State Building turned off its lights Thursday and Friday in Reagan's honor. Flags on public and military buildings will fly at half-mast for 30 days. Well, there are also the private memories of Reagan, which are now being shared with the nation and indeed the world. Betty Nguyen has one of those stories.
In a stone barn in western Philadelphia, Trevor Farrell stores boxes of memories, articles and awards honoring his life's work, helping those in need. It began when he was just 11.
Coming into the city, we saw a homeless man, and we pulled over, and I got out of the car with my dad behind me, and I went up to the man, and I gave him a blanket and pillow. And I felt good.
So good, he began to collect more items for the homeless. Others joined him. He formed an organization and got an invitation to the Oval Office.
You picture a president, you know, to be up on a pedestal, so to speak, and he didn't seem to be that way to me. I felt like I was with my grandfather.
And then in 1986, an even greater honor.
We see the dream born again in the joyful compassion of a 13-year-old Trevor Farrell. 2 years ago, Trevor left his suburban Philadelphia home to bring blankets and food to the helpless and homeless. Trevor's, yours is the living spirit of brotherly love. Would you four stand up for a moment?
Trevor never felt comfortable with all the attention, but Reagan's words still move him.
Trevor, you have given these people the gift of self-respect, security, a sense of belonging, and most of all, you've given them a reason to go on. And I'm getting upset as I read this. As I said that, I can't finish it. Can't.
Today, Trevor is still helping others. His thrift store provides furniture, dishes, and clothing to people in need. His daughter, Katie, works with him. For school, she wrote a report about President Reagan, including his favorite food.
I wrote down jelly beans, and I didn't even have to guess or anything or look up on the internet. It's just I knew that he really liked jelly beans.
Her dad still keeps the jar Reagan gave him 18 years ago.
I would not suggest eating these.
Farrell says the best gift Reagan gave him was recognition that he was doing the right thing.
I look up to President Reagan, and I know a lot of people say, well, that's kind of against what you should be for. He cut a lot of social services and stuff like that, and I understand that. At the same time, I think he was giving a message to us that us as citizens have to stand up and make a difference.
Nun hat in seiner kalifornischen Heimat die letzte Ruhe gefunden, in einer privaten und bewegenden Zeremonie.
Bei Sonnenuntergang, so hatte es der Verstorbene verfügt, sollte sein Sarg in seiner Heimat Kalifornien beigesetzt werden. An einem Platz, den Reagan selbst ausgewählt hatte, mit weitem Blick über die Hügel Kaliforniens bis zum Pazifik. Noch einmal versammelten sich seine Familie, Freunde und Weggefährten am Grab des 40. Präsidenten der Vereinigten Staaten. Seine Tochter erinnerte an die Todesstunde ihres Vaters. Er öffnete noch einmal die Augen und blickte meine Mutter an. Er hat uns gezeigt, dass weder Krankheit noch Tod die Liebe besiegen können. Sein Sohn Ron sagte,
He is home now. He is free.
Er ist zu Hause, er ist frei. In seinem letzten Brief an das amerikanische Volk schrieb mein Vater, ich beginne jetzt die Reise zum Sonnenuntergang meines Lebens. Auch bei dieser letzten Trauerzeremonie war jedes Detail perfekt geplant. Eine Ehrenformation von Kampfflugzeugen flog über die Grabstätte. Danach trat die 82-jährige Witwe zum letzten Mal an den Sarg ihres Mannes, um Abschied zu nehmen. Das bewegende Ende einer Woche der Trauer in den USA.
Ask them to go in there with all they've got and win just one for the Kipper.
I'm sure you've seen it many times this week. It was his favorite film, the one that defined him. Former US President Ronald Reagan, the one-time Hollywood movie star, became known to millions as Gipper after his role as a University of Notre Dame football player. And our guest is an alumni of the University of Notre Dame who got to spend some time with the former president when he visited there as governor of California. Tom O'Neill is senior editor for In Touch Weekly and host of GoldDerby.com, and he joins us from New York to talk about Reagan's film career. Thanks, Tom, for being here. It wasn't really an overly successful Hollywood career, was it? And Ronald Reagan was really quite honest about that and used to joke about it, didn't he?
Yes, he was fully aware of the fact that despite the fact that he had made 54 films, he never made a great movie. There is a rumor that he passed up the role that Humphrey Bogart got in Casablanca. That's not really true, by the way, in case you've heard that in other coverage. But as you mentioned on the top of this segment, the Knute Rockne All-American movie was the one that first made him famous and always had a special place in his heart. And part of it is because Notre Dame, for those who know, it's a big sports college with a big football team. That's called the Fighting Irish. Reagan is Irish, and I think he felt a connection there too.
Now, of course, as we mentioned in the introduction there, back in the mid-70s, you spent some time with Ronald Reagan. He was very honest, talked about where he felt he was politically and his career in the movies. Tell us, most intrigued.
It was an amazing experience. It was 1976, just a few weeks before the Republican convention. Reagan came that close, within 50 delegates, of stealing the nomination away from Gerald Ford. But as he arrived on campus, and of course this is the home of the Gipper, this is Notre Dame itself, it was kind of a religious experience for Ronald Reagan to be there at that time. And suddenly it looked as if he was going to fail in politics the same way he had failed in Hollywood, never making it to the top of the rung. And so I was interviewing him as a young student journalist then, and I was in the back of a limo with him. We drove around for quite a bit one day, and he was looking out the window saying, well, I guess I'll never be president, will I? And I would say, well, governor, because that's what you had to call him in those days. You could win one for the Gipper. You're right here at Notre Dame now. Keep the spirit up. Of course he rallied, and of course he eventually became president. But it was always interesting how important the legend of the Gipper is to him and to everyone else, because you can see at the funeral proceedings all over the place, people are holding up signs saying goodbye, Gipper.
And of course, all week we've heard all about Ronald Reagan, his political career, and we do want to just concentrate on his film career, just in the time that we have, the limited time that we have with us. So what was really the film that stood out? You mentioned Gipper. I mean, the Gipper, was that his most successful? It was certainly his favorite. Was it his most successful?
It's the movie that made him famous. It was called Knute Rockne All-American. It's not really a great movie when you look back. The single best role he ever had was in King's Row, and that's where he plays this character who's in the hospital, who's lost his arms and legs, or at least one limb, etc. And he was so good in that movie that there was talk of an Oscar nomination, but he didn't get it. What happened to Reagan in Hollywood was, over these many years, he was so well liked and admired personally that he became president of the Screen Actors Guild. And when he took on this political labor job, that's where he got his taste of politics. But we forget that, and I don't think the international audience watching now even knows the place that Reagan played when you got into the 1960s before he became governor of California. He was on television all the time, in prime time, in a cowboy hat, hosting a show called Death Valley Days. And it was a terrific old Western. And there's so many facets to Reagan's career that I think internationally people don't quite understand at all.
And throughout his political career, he stole lines from his own movies, not only his own movies, in fact, other people's movies, didn't he?
He did. Actually, probably the best line that he stole was when he was shot, and he, of course, is in the hospital. Nancy came to see him, and she was all teary-eyed, of course, thrilled that her husband seems to be have good luck to live through this experience. Do you remember what he said to Nancy that time?
No, not that time. Was that I didn't duck? I forgot to duck? Yeah.
He said, honey, I forgot to duck. And that's a famous line from a boxing movie.
Now, would we expect now to just see reruns of every movie Ronald Reagan ever did and all his TV series?
Sure, and some of them are pretty good, and some of them are pretty bad, of course, like Bedtime for Bonzo, the most notorious Reagan movie in which he starred opposite a chimp. But as you say, Rosemary, he always had a great sense of humor about it, so if he could laugh at it, so can we.
All right, Tom O'Neill, thanks for your insights, your experiences too, as you ran into Ronald Reagan in the mid-70s. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Tonight, Nancy Reagan. As America mourns President Ronald Reagan, we'll spend an hour with the woman he so dearly loved. Classic interviews with former First Lady Nancy Reagan on a very special Larry King Live. Good evening. During a week filled with sadness and reflection following the death of President Reagan, our thoughts are naturally also with the woman who stood by his side without fail, his wife Nancy. Tonight, one day after President Reagan was laid to rest, we give you our favorite moments with the woman he loved so very, very much. It's really just a simple love story played out on a global stage. Were you friends from the start? Did you hit it off
right away? Right away. It was a blind date, as you know. It was a blind date, and I knew right away. Took him a little bit longer.
Did you have to work on it?
I had to push him a little bit.
But you knew right away?
I knew right away.
What was it, in retrospect?
I don't know. He was so unlike any actor I'd ever known. He wasn't talking about himself all the time. My last picture, my next picture, let's talk about me. What did you think of my last picture? You know. He was interested in so many things. And he was nice looking also. Didn't hurt.
He extraordinarily, even his severest critic would admit, had an absence of ego, right? He was able to put ego somewhere.
Yeah.
How do you explain that, especially in someone, not only in the public eye politically, but in the public eye in every way you could be?
Yeah, no, he's never had an ego. He's the same. I never knew him when he was in radio, but they say that he's exactly the same now as when he was in radio, which I believe, because he's exactly the same now as when he was in pictures. He's just, he is a man absolutely devoid of ego or...
What are your arguments like? Because it's hard to picture this. I mean, we all know you so well. It's hard to picture the two of you having a fight.
We don't really have a fight. We disagree. I mean, there's nobody you agree with all the time. It's impossible.
But you've never said, get out?
No, no. What if he did? I'd be, oh no.
Why did you write My Turn?
Well, I thought after 8 years that I'd try and give my side of things that had been said. And I thought a lot of things were misunderstood about me and what I did or what I didn't do. And so I did. I was surprised at the people who said it was vindictive. I never meant it to be vindictive. You know.
In fact, a lot of the reviews, even many that praised it, titled it Getting Even.
I know, and I didn't mean that. I didn't mean it. I didn't write it in a get even sense.
Was it a set the record straight sense?
Yeah.
That turned out to be getting even in some senses, though, right?
I guess it did.
But in other words, you didn't say, I'm going to, boy, this guy was a bad guy, and I'm going to tell you why he was.
No, I did not. No, and you know, the letters that I got, the ones that really pleased you were the ones that started out by saying, I owe you an apology because I believed everything I read about you.
Yeah.
And now I know, after reading your book, that I was wrong, and I apologize.
As I've told you personally, I did too. And by the way, program aside, Nancy Reagan is you're a terrific lady, and there's a lot. But where did we read you wrong? And do you think, honestly, that you might have played a part in us reading you wrong?
I could have.
This had to be at the start, right?
Right at the start. But I didn't know anything about Washington. I didn't know any of the people. I didn't know any of the players. I didn't know the town.
It wasn't Sacramento.
Wasn't Sacramento.
A lot different.
A lot different. And I have, if I get hurt, then I tend to pull back. And some people, you know, they translate that into being snobbish or whatever. And I don't know, it just all got off on the wrong foot. And then after the gridiron, I thought, well, now we're back to what it always was. I mean, I was used to, isn't it wonderful about that nice Nancy Reagan marrying that nice Ronald Reagan, or Nancy Davis marrying that nice
the California
Ronald
style.
Yeah, that's all I was ever used to. And then suddenly, I don't know, It all changed.
And even with your illness and recovery, it came back, that kind of grind.
Yeah.
Do you look back, therefore, on Washington with mixed feelings?
Well, it was a wonderful 8 years in many ways. It was not so wonderful in other ways. I mean, there were...
Mixed a good word?
There were, yeah, mixed is a good word.
Do you ever miss it?
I miss my friends, you know. I'm sorry I didn't get to know you better in Washington.
We'll do something about that.
All right.
No, don't start rumors.
I have no comment.
Do you miss the city at all?
Yes, I do. Uh-huh. Yeah.
Camp David. Do you miss that life?
I miss Camp David a lot. I miss Camp David a lot. But I miss the staff at the White House. I hear from them a lot, which is very nice. I love. And I hear from the staff at Camp David.
You miss the life of everybody. I mean, life of a former First Lady isn't too terrible. But I mean, when you do nothing, right? You pick up the phone and everything is done. Do you miss that?
There are times I miss it. For instance, last night.
What happened, Nancy?
Last night, we suddenly had no hot water. Now, if it had been at the White House, all I would have had to have done was to pick up the phone and say, we have no hot water, and there would have been hot water right away, right? Well, that's not the way it works in private life. We went through last night with no hot water.
Right, so that's times you miss it. And
those times I miss it, yes.
What don't you miss?
I don't miss the rumors. I don't miss the backbiting. I don't miss the always on display. I don't miss that. But I do miss, I miss my friends. I do miss my friends.
It's a never-ending, there's no pressure cooker like that pressure cooker, right? I mean,
no.
we can only fathom it.
No.
And there's very few people who've known it.
When we were there, Ronnie was shot 2 months after we were there and almost died, which they never really got. I don't think most people knew that, the press included.
That he was that close to dying?
He was that close to dying.
When you say close to death, did they tell you how close to death?
Oh, yes. 3 times. 3 times.
Did you ever think you were going to lose him?
I did.
You know, as you were starting to imagine life without him?
Well, yes. Yes.
During his career, Ronald Reagan passed through 1,000 crowded places. But there was only one person, he said, who could make him lonely by just leaving the room. America honors you, Nancy, for the loyalty and love you gave this man on a wonderful journey and to that journey's end. Today, our whole nation grieves with you and your family.
Our cares are no longer his. We meet him now only in memory, but we will join him soon enough, all of us, when we are home, when we are free.
Last night, Ronald Reagan was laid to rest at his presidential library in Simi Valley, California. In 1995, Nancy gave us a tour of that beautiful place. The first stop, President Reagan's boyhood home, Dixon, Illinois. Obviously, this is typical Midwest, small, poor, rural Illinois.
Yeah. Makes me feel a little sad.
Yeah, for what was.
Yeah.
Is he someone who, never got that out of him? There's always Dixon went with him wherever he went.
Oh, yes. Oh, my, yes. His parents and his brother.
Dixon High.
Lifeguard.
Now, come on, would a young Nancy have flipped for that?
You bet.
This was still at Dixon?
Still at, yes.
He's jumping in the water?
Yeah. He was very good and is a very good swimmer and diver. Taught his kids, our kids, to swim.
The letter.
That's his letter sweater that he got. And that was when he was going to get ready for Knut Rockne.
There he is in our racket.
Yes, WHO.
Sportscaster.
Doesn't he look great?
Is this a very happy phase of your life?
Oh,
The
yes.
movie phase?
Yes, I liked it. I knew I wasn't going to keep on doing it forever and ever. I mean,
Why?
I had.
How did you know that? Why didn't you want to be an actress? I mean,
I did
full-time.
want to be an actress, but I knew that when I found the person I wanted to marry, that would be it.
You mean you were that goal-oriented that you told yourself, when I meet Mr. Right, it's... The rest is
knew.
over.
Well, I'd seen so many marriages, Larry, in this business go. Well, you know, you're always told when you're an actress, from the minute you hit the set, how dear and darling you are. And you expect that to carry through at home. Well, when it doesn't carry through at home and everybody doesn't kowtow to you, you get pretty upset.
Did it make it easier, the fact that you knew movies to make your marriage a success? There's the fact that you understood the business?
I suppose.
You think?
I suppose.
Did you like the fact he was an actor?
I thought he was a good actor. He
Underrated
was
actor.
a good
Why
actor.
isn't, you know, and
I don't
I've had some
know.
critics tell me that a very underrated actor.
He
Great
was.
player of light comedy.
He was. He was.
Do you think maybe the features were too strong, or he was just...
I don't know.
Nice
I
guy.
think, well, he says that it was because of his involvement with the Screen Actors Guild.
What's the closing of Chasen's? You mentioned how you didn't like the fact that that's your... There it is. That's
We
your
went there.
restaurant.
We went there. That was part of our courtship. There and at the Holden's house, because we didn't want to go out. As soon as we got through the part of the beginning of a courtship where you have to go out and go to clubs,
Roses and
you know, all that, then we decided we both really liked to stay home. So we'd go to Chasen's or we'd go to the Holden's.
And early evenings, lots of early evenings in LA. Chasen's is also a place you went a lot to after the presidency, when you got back. wasn't
Yes, but Chasen's was the place, and I don't know what they're going to do with this picture, but over one of the booths, they have our picture with Maud Chasen, and that was the booth where we decided what church we were going to be married in and when we were going to be married.
Who proposed? Did he propose?
Of course, he
Of course.
called my father.
Before he asked you?
Mm-hmm.
And
my father said, fine.
And how did he ask you and where?
He asked me at home. We were at home.
His house? or
My
your-
home. My apartment.
And he said, casually, I called your dad.
Yes. And it's all right with your family. Is it all right with you?
Were you coy?
No. And I don't think he thought I would be.
You worked in how many movies with him?
I only worked in one movie with
The
him.
Navy movie.
Yeah, but I did some television shows with him.
Oh, that's hot.
Oh, it's not.
Oh, but delicious. Everything's just right, isn't it, Patty?
Yeah. Well, it's the easiest meal to make. My electric servants do everything.
Well, that's part of living better electrically.
You like acting with him?
Oh, sure. Sure. That was fun. But
The movie with Hellcats of the Navy, right?
Uh-huh. And it could have been a better movie than it was.
You knew I was fresh out of a bad marriage when we met. I wanted to be sure this time, so we played it safe. Until I knew that you were Mr. Right. Then you gave me that line about wartime marriages.
I wanted a wife and kids, not a widow and orphans.
Sure. And I began to think maybe you were playing the South Sea Circuit.
You knew better.
How could I know? Did you give me a post-dated check?
This week.
Hi, this is Michael Boone.
Get me a roll call up here! Now! Get it up here! Get out of the way!
show,
You'll
and this
see.
is the famous shooting
There.
the cars. Down he goes, down. Rainy day in Washington.
There's Tim.
There's Tim, shot.
Yeah.
Where were you, Nancy?
I had been at a luncheon, and for some reason, I felt I had to leave. I've never felt that way before or since.
I mean, you got up and you just...
And I said, I'm sorry, I have to leave. And I went back to the White House. And about 5 minutes after I got back, George Opfer said there's been a shooting. And told me that Ronnie had not been hit. Well, at that time, you know. But I was halfway down to the car. And he said, no, you don't have to go. He's all right.
Was there a period of time you think you'd lose him?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Early hours?
The press dwelled on the funny things that he said.
I hope you're a Republican.
All in all, I'd rather be in Philadelphia. Yeah. We're coming home there.
Yeah.
But they didn't, not on how serious it was. I mean, they couldn't find...
It was a lot more serious than we thought it was, right?
Oh, much.
I mean, he was...
Much.
How close would you say? I mean, time has evolved now. How close?
Oh,
touch and go?
Yes. Oh, yes.
Loss of blood?
They couldn't find the bullet. When they did find it, it was a quarter of an inch from his heart. He had lost so much blood. He was so close to going into shock. And if he had, of course, that would have been it. It was...
He recovered so quickly, though.
Yeah, I know, but
that's... You never forget that. That's...
No, that you don't. That you don't.
You've had an interesting life, Nancy.
It hasn't been dull.
So I'm going to let you take it from here.
Oh.
But what is this?
Well, that's a cruise missile.
This is an actual cruise missile.
Mm-hmm.
When he signed, as we were talking, when Ronald Reagan got this signed, they took them out. Right? This wasn't just, we're not going to build more.
No. His whole purpose was to get them out, to get rid of them.
The United States and Soviet Union were able to get rid of them. After historic summits in places like Reykjavik, Iceland, and Geneva, Switzerland, Presidents Reagan and Gorbachev eventually met in Washington to order these weapons of mass destruction into the scrap heap.
Mr. General Secretary, though my pronunciation may give you difficulty, the maxim is doviai no proviai, trust but verify.
Назначение этого...
На каждой встрече вы это повторяете.
You repeat that at every meeting.
But this is American-Soviet relationships during your husband's presidency, dated according to major events.
Yes, yes.
Very well done, by the way.
Thank you.
And there's the meeting.
This is the wonderful meeting, that everybody... I think Gorbachev had only arrived. You can see the relationship between the two.
Smiles.
Yeah. It was a very cold day. And everybody thought that when Ronnie had said to him, why don't you and I go down to the boathouse, sit and talk? And everybody thought, oh, no, don't do that. Well, of course, when they left, much, much later, and everybody, not everybody, but a few people said, I think we should go down there and break it up. And I think it was George Shultz who said, if you do that, you don't deserve to have the job that you have. And when they came out, they had arranged for 2 more summits.
You could tell that's a great picture because you absolutely, the picture being 1,000 words.
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
right in that one.
Yeah, I think this is on Arbat Street. We had arranged to go and visit a family. And then we were told that if we went, they wouldn't let them out. So, of course, we didn't go. So we had a little time in there. And our son had said to me, now, Mom, don't let them keep you locked up. Try and get out on the street. So I said, fine, this is the time. We'll go to Arbat Street. And we went out, and everything was wonderful. I mean, the people were so nice and so glad to see you. And then the KGB arrived and didn't become so wonderful. And Helen Thomas, I remember, they got a hold of Helen and they were going to drag her off somewhere. And I saved her life. And I said to her afterwards, Helen, you owe me one now.
She owes. That's a great picture.
Yeah.
They really liked him and he them.
The people were...
He liked the Russian people, didn't he?
Yes, he did. These are fascinating because they are all in Ronnie's handwriting. All the leaders in Russia died off on us, you know, when we wanted to make contact.
So, my dear Mr. President, my dear Mr. Andropov, dear General Gorbachev, dear Mr. General Secretary.
But this is all Ronnie's writing, you know.
Now, I know this from personal experience when I spoke here at your wonderful library when you invited me to speak. It was one of the great days, and we had lunch. And then I got this wonderful letter from the president. Sorry he couldn't be here. Was he fond of writing letters longhand?
Oh, yeah. Well, he used to write all of his own speeches.
Yes, I mean, you don't often see personal letters from heads of state to heads of state.
No, I know. But he liked to. He liked to.
Did he write love letters?
Yes.
I mean, that's a way he communicated his illness, by personal letter. That's a gutsy thing, you know. Was that your idea, Nancy?
Mm-mm.
No, all of his.
It was the two of us.
The crew of the Space Shuttle Challenger honored us by the manner in which they lived their lives. We will never forget them, nor the last time we saw them, this morning, as they prepared for their journey and waved goodbye, and slipped the surly bonds of Earth to touch the face of God.
Now, folks, this is semi-incredible because we're in Simi Valley, California.
However,
but we're not.
No, we're not.
The Oval Office.
Isn't this amazing? It's exactly everything Ronnie had in the Oval Office is here.
This is unreal.
I know.
This picture here is his last day.
His last day, yes. It looks kind of sad, doesn't it?
Yeah, he looks sad, and it looks sad. I'm also told this is the room where he learned that you had cancer.
Yes, he was sitting there, and Dr. Hutton, who was our White House doctor, told him. He'd gone out to the hospital with me.
Now, what was brought? What did you bring? The desk is the desk?
The desk is the Kennedy desk.
Yeah.
But all of these things Ronnie had on his desk.
Pictures behind as well.
Pictures behind as well. And then we recreated this. That is the view that you get from the Oval Office. And as it gets nighttime, we have it so that it dims down.
This has got to be one of the more popular things on the tour of the museum.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. The saddles there, Walter Annenberg donated.
Wow.
And we had those. Everything.
And the
rug.
As you had them, the rug is here?
Everything.
But how does this feel? I mean, really, how does it feel?
First time it felt very strange.
Weird.
Very, very strange. Very strange.
They did a perfect job.
They did. And that's why I keep saying, for children, particularly for children, who might not, well, say they get to Washington, and say they get on a tour, chances are they're not going to get into the Oval Office.
Correct.
And
here's your chance.
Here's your chance.
This is it.
Yes.
The phone is even the phone.
Yep. Everything.
Wonderful desk.
Yes.
A thought for today. You can be too big for God to use, but you cannot be too small. From the Bible of Nellie Wilson Reagan.
Yeah.
Also recreated state dinners, those special evenings for very special guests. The library specifically examines this one, honoring Anwar Sadat, held in 1981, just months before his death. This is a place setting for the state dinner for Sadat.
Yeah. Yep. With the china.
Tell us about that china.
With the china that never... It was donated by a foundation to the White House. And they kept saying that I had bought the china, or I don't know what. I never bought the china. I accepted the donation because the White House needed china very, very badly. And the first person, I'll never forget it, to come to my defense when, this brouhaha was going on, was Margaret Truman. And she said, she's absolutely right. She needed it. The White House needed it. I know how badly they needed it. You have a lot of breakage.
Oh, yeah.
You know.
But it's also beautiful china.
It is.
Gorgeous.
It is pretty.
This is, that's classic picture of
with
Bob Hope making you laugh.
Yes.
There's Nancy in the kitchen.
Putting last little touches on. And that's one of the outdoor dinners that I dearly loved because we had all the trees lit, but then you had the monument in the background, and I'd try to pick a night when there'd be a big moon.
Outdoor state dinner, beautiful. And TV trays?
Yeah, we did that anytime we could. We stayed home.
And lunch, right?
And lunch.
President reads the Washington
Reading.
Post at lunch.
Yep.
Do you always feel like a renter, like you're there in the public's house?
Well, it felt like home.
You did
to
feel
me.
like home.
It really felt like home to me. Ronnie kept saying, I've been given temporary custody of this.
But Nancy...
But I felt at home. I mean, and he felt home too. But he always wanted to remind people that he knew he wasn't going to be there forever.
The day you left it was a very sad day.
Elaine said I should say something, but I'll never get through it. See? I can't. Thank you.
8 years is a long time, and we'd had a lot of things happen to us there. And everybody had been so
Sad
great.
day leaving people.
Sad day, yes.
There just aren't enough words to thank you for all that you've meant to all of us and how hard it is to say goodbye and how much of a team we did become. And God bless you all, and as I say, there just aren't words enough to express our appreciation to all of you. Thank you, and God bless you all.
We commend into your hands the spirit of your servant, Ronald Wilson Reagan. We commend him into your care and keeping, now and forevermore, in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Welcome back. Tonight we're sharing some special moments with Nancy Reagan. In 2001, she joined us to mark the president's 90th birthday. Her visit also followed the release of a book containing some emotional love letters that he wrote to Nancy. I mean, we all know about love affairs, but yours is different. That book showed us how different, the letters, which I hope if you don't, I'm going to read a couple times.
No, I'm not.
Did you How do you explain that? Is this just fate? You and him?
I don't know. I don't know. I've had letters. I found a letter that was written to me from a girl who was getting married, and she wanted to know the secret of a happy marriage. And I wrote back and said something to the effect that I had no magic formula, and I never sat down and thought about it. But everything just fell into place with Ronnie and me. We completed each other.
Did you ever fight?
We disagreed, but we never yelled or slammed
Never
doors.
had none of those, get out of here. Or...
No. Mm-mm. But there's nobody that you agree with all the time.
So you, by completing each other, where you weren't whole, he made you whole, and you the same for him. And that continues now.
Oh, yes.
Except you are faced with something now, and you've helped so many people by getting the tragic way that someone has to have affected by someone for us to be focused on it. When did you first notice?
I didn't.
You never noticed the
I
Alzheimer's
didn't.
coming on?
No. We went to Mayo's in August that year.
Was there the normal memory slippages that older people have?
Well, yes.
You know, I forgot his name.
You forget names. I forget names.
Forgot we had lunch today.
So no, I didn't notice anything.
And then what happened at Mayo?
Well, they diagnosed it as Alzheimer's.
And they came and told you?
Mm-hmm.
Did you get second opinions? Did you...
No,
how do you react to something like that?
Well, we'd been going to Mayo's for so long, and I knew all the doctors so well. I accepted what they said. But of course, nobody can ever know what it's like till you're there.
What was it like for him to write that letter? That now famous, what was it, 94?
94, he went into the library, and I was with him, and he just sat down at the table and wrote it.
Now, we have learned subsequently through letters how good a writer he was.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Very good writer.
I wonder if he doctored scripts ever, because he could have.
No.
He had a way with words.
Yes, he did. But there's a book that's coming out by Marty Anderson called Reagan in His Own Words. He found a lot of speeches and radio shows and...
He wrote his own radio show?
Yeah,
Oh, and that's... Yeah, I saw somewhere that's coming.
Yes, and it's wonderful. I mean, you can't believe the things that he wrote about. I remember when he first ran for governor, and people criticized him because he was talking too much about foreign affairs. And then when he ran for president, they were criticizing him for the opposite. I mean, you know.
He liked to write.
He liked to write, yes.
So he just sat down and wrote that letter to the public. Because he knew what was coming. So, as they say, what Hemingway says, class is grace under pressure.
Yeah.
He had that.
He sure had.
Did he express fears to you?
No.
He didn't say,
no,
this is going to be terrible, or...
No, well, all he said, which is in the letter, that he knew it would be hard on me, and that he hoped that with people's support and faith that I'd get through it, and he was sorry to put me in this position.
What should people know who hear this news about a relative, a wife, a husband, a mother, a father? What advice can the caregiver give another caregiver?
Well, that's hard to answer, Larry. You just get up each day and put one foot in front of the other and go. You know, each day is different.
But it is
it's a progressive disease.
That's right. So Monday is not going to be better than Sunday. What about new drugs we hear about?
As I understand it, they have 2 new drugs that will delay the onset, which I would have been very happy to have used.
Toughest part for the caregiver, I guess, is you don't get back what you give, right? Isn't that the hardest, to keep giving when someone is not responding, not through any fault of their own?
No, that doesn't bother you. At least it doesn't bother me. It's sad to see somebody you love and have been married for so long, and you can't share memories. That's the sad part.
You know, I never thought of that. Couples sit down and say, remember when
Yes.
little Fergie broke his foot?
Right.
There was the picnic.
Right, right. You can't do that.
So you share them with yourself. How important are your friends?
Oh, very important. Very important. But, you know, you don't want to, if somebody calls you, you don't want to unload on them every time they call.
Well, you're not a complainer by nature, right? You don't sit around and talk
I
about
hope
it.
not.
But you have, you know, helped a lot of people.
I hope so.
You've raised a lot of money
hope
for this
so.
disease.
Yeah.
For a while, you weren't talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
What made you change?
I guess being with Ronnie.
And I guess he would have wanted you to, wouldn't he?
Mm-hmm.
Because he would have wanted
That's
to help.
why he wrote the letter, because he wanted to help people. And he made it public, and, you know, the same thing that he did with colon cancer, prostate cancer.
He's had them all.
He's had them all.
What do you do with frustration? Because you must have that. It must be frustrating when you're with someone who's not cognitive.
Well, you just learn to live with it. I mean, what is there to do?
Well, some people, there are hospitals that specialize in just treating Alzheimer patients. You would never do that.
Oh, no. Oh, no. Never. Never. No, no. He's going to stay at home.
Do you ever hope that maybe the end comes? I mean, do you ever say, you know, that maybe it isn't such a life?
No, I never.
Because he's not in pain.
No, he's not in pain. Mm-mm. Together we're going a long, long way.
I want to discuss some things because we're going to be showing some clips from them, and I want your thoughts on them. When you sang Our Love Is Here to Stay at that White House gala, what was that moment like?
Well, that's our song, you know.
Gershwin to you.
Mm-hmm. And I sang it to Ronnie.
Did he know you were going to do it?
No, no, he was so surprised.
We have just seen an inaugural. I guess one of the inaugurals, there's some inaugurals that remain implanted in our mind. Certainly John F. Kennedy's in the snow. And your inaugural, the red hat, the red coat, looking up. What do you remember?
I remember mostly that it was very overcast, gray. But when Ronnie came forward, the clouds broke and the sun came out.
Ronald Reagan, do solemnly swear.
The same thing happened in Sacramento.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
On his first term as governor?
Mm-hmm. And as a matter of fact, when he was shot, the next morning there was a rainbow over the White House.
What were you thinking then? Were you then the girl who grew up in Silver Spring, or the little girl from Chicago? What were you standing up there? Your husband is about to become president.
Well,
you made movies together.
Yeah, well, we just made one together, but...
Hellcats of the Navy.
Yes. Well, it's so overwhelming when you're really doing it that I don't remember thinking anything except that, my gosh, here he is, and he's president.
My Ronnie.
My Ronnie.
They just celebrated the anniversary of Challenger, and we will never forget your husband that day.
I know.
What was that like for you?
Well, about like it was for everybody else.
He went down there.
Yeah, yeah. Terrible, terrible. Sad.
Is that one of the hardest things of executive things that people have to do? Tragedy.
Oh, I think so, yeah. Trying to give people support, and yes, it's very hard. And they're crying, and you're crying, which I can do pretty easily.
How about his farewell speech? He said goodbye. Is that a sad day for you, or are you happy to leave? You did a little spin around Washington.
Yeah, we did. The helicopter took us over the White House, and he looked down and he said, "Look, honey, there's our little cottage."
In this room lives the sweet ghost of a love gone away. It comes to me whispering the things you used to say between hills and valleys of softness where we lay in this room. It's lonely now. In this room I can barely breathe. This air that speaks your name, it flows through me from each corner and from the window frame where we watch together for the sun to rise again. In this room I miss you.
So Nancy, let me say thank you for all you do. Thank you for your love. And thank you for just being you.
They say true love never dies, but sometimes lovers do. And few ever realize the kind of love we knew. In this room there were flowers sent to ease the pain, and I prayed for hours, trying to understand how one life passing could mean this love was through. In this room I can feel you, I will see you again. In this room.
Summers have passed since the battle that you fought here. You were young the day you were.
Thank you for joining us. The world's grieving for a remarkable man tonight, Ronald Wilson Reagan, 40th President of the United States. We were privileged to do 2 hour-long interviews with him. Tonight, the first of them from January 1990. Mr. Reagan had been out of office for about a year, and I asked what he missed most.
Well, really the people. The very fine people that you worked with and all of that. That was it.
Don't miss the trappings, don't miss the White House itself?
No. If I had to pick places or anything like that, I have great many happy memories of Camp David, where you lived in a normal-sized house and could go out the door and take a walk if you wanted to, or ride a horse.
Those were disadvantages to the White House then?
Well, the thing is, there was a certain amount of burden of gilded cage atmosphere there. You could look out the windows at the people walking on Pennsylvania Avenue and so forth, and you knew that you couldn't go out and do that. You were kind of in there for security reasons and so forth. But
and are you the kind of person who wanted to go out?
Oh, sure.
Because Harry Truman liked going out. Those were different days.
Yes, he used to walk consistently, I know. And it was a different time, though. Incidentally, though, I have to wonder about, as we start here, I've heard a great deal from Nancy about a little problem with a cold metal microphone that wound up being against her flesh.
Her body, yes.
Yeah, she didn't have clothes like this on, so...
She was at our studio in New York, and we put the microphone down, it went down her dress, and then hit all sorts of parts of her, and down her legs. Anyone in New York, they know your wife intimately. She was a real trooper. You were telling me something interesting before we went on. I think the audience would really be interested in. We know that you're hard of hearing, but it's not due to the aging process.
Oh.
Tell that. This is really fascinating.
Well, I began finding that, particularly with the one side, I was having a great deal of difficulty in hearing, and finally I went to the very distinguished Dr. House, and he did find that, yes, the hearing was very low there, and so he started asking me about things that might have happened, because it was something that had taken place in the nature of an injury. And I didn't know how far back he wanted to go, and finally, when he said it, as far back as I could remember, I remembered a movie that I made many years ago, and me and another actor were running from the bad guys and went to get behind a tree and start shooting at them. And I'm afraid that my fellow actor didn't know much about guns, because as we turned around the tree, he was just behind me. He put that .38 right up on my shoulder and pulled the trigger. And you know, the concussion actually knocked me 3 or 4 feet to the side. And then Dr. House said, "Say no more." That's what did it, and it was a deterioration then of the nerves that took place over the years.
Because you sure have handled the aging process well. Do you feel as good as you look? I mean, you look incredible.
Well, thank you very much. I feel just fine.
I mean, you don't... It seems that you are in, you know, everyone's envious, like the hair is real. It grows back, right?
Yes.
They have surgery and it grows back.
I can't take credit for that. That has to be by the genes, because my father died with a very handsome head of hair, and my mother also. So I guess I just inherited that.
You know, you're very good at describing things, and something has fascinated me, and I'm sure the audience. What is it like to be shot? I mean, we all think about that. We've watched it in movies. You've played it in movies. You've been shot and shot others. What's it like?
Well, I'll tell you what it's like.
To be really shot.
What it was like was, I didn't know I was shot. I heard a noise, and we came out of the hotel and headed for the limousine, and I heard some noise, and I thought it was firecrackers. And the next thing I knew, one of the Secret Service agents behind me just seized me here by the waist and plunged me headfirst into the limo. I landed on the seat, and the seat divider was down, and then he dived in on top of me, which is part of their procedure to make sure that I'm covered. Well, as it turned out later, the shot that got me caromed off the side of the limousine and hit me while I was diving into the car. And it hit me back here under the arm, and then hit a rib, and that's what caused an extreme pain. And then it turned instead of edgewise and went tumbling down to within an inch of my heart. But when I got in the car, I hadn't felt anything. He landed on top of me, and then the pain, which now I know came from the bullet hitting that rib, that terrific pain. And I said, "Jerry, get off. I think you've broken a rib of mine." And he got off very quickly. And just then I coughed, and I had a handful of bright red frothy blood. So I said, and I guess evidently the broken rib has pierced the lung. Well, he simply turned and said George Washington Hospital, and we were on our way. But and all the way I was I used up my handkerchief, and then I used up his, but when I got to the emergency entrance, I got out of the car and walked in, and a nurse met me, and I told her I was having a little trouble breathing, and what I thought it was. And the next thing I knew, then when my knees began to turn to rubber, and I wound up on a gurney, and I was wearing a suit like this. For the first time I'd ever worn it, it was brand new, and they were taking scissors and cutting it off of me.
And you were thinking, what are they doing? Did you ever think you might die?
No, although I didn't just leave it to chance. I talked to my friend upstairs about that.
But you never thought that this was the end?
No.
Because some people in that situation, in a trauma situation, think it's over.
No, I found out afterward that a lot of those people there at the hospital thought it could very likely be the end. They said that I was very near going into a state of shock. And I had also lost more than half the blood in my body. And so that, but...
Were you angry?
Well, I didn't know for quite a while until they began to tell me about the young man that had done this and what his problem was, that he was not exactly on a normal basis. And so then I added him to my prayers, that prayers for myself, that, well, if I wanted healing for myself, maybe he should have some healing for himself.
The Pope forgave the man who shot him. You forgive John Hinckley?
Yes. I found out he wasn't thinking on all levels, on all cylinders. Yeah.
We interrupt. There's been a late development. Shots reported fired outside the hotel where President Reagan spoke a short while ago. Here's Bernard Shaw in our Washington Bureau.
Bob, as you can understand, details are very sketchy. We don't know precisely what happened, nor... Pardon me. Okay, my apology.
I can confirm that the president has been shot once in the left chest. The bullet entered from his left side.
Lynn Nofziger has told reporters at the hospital that the president was not wounded.
He was.
He was wounded. My God. He was... the president was hit. He is in stable condition. All this information...
As of now, I am in control here in the White House, pending return of the Vice President.
The President of the United States is quoted as telling his wife at his hospital bed, "Honey, I forgot to duck."
No other international network can cover the US election as widely, with more considered, comprehensive coverage than CNN.
We look at events that are familiar to Americans, but we look at them at the way non-Americans would, at the way people around the world would.
We are the outsiders. We will be stepping back, pretty much as we do with any election.
CNN brings you the U.S. election campaign in a way that most American journalists can't because of the kind of organization we are.
We are unrivaled at being able to take all this information, put the analysis together, and make it comprehensible to the different sectors of our audience.
We approach it the way you would, with some skepticism, with some confusion, with a great deal of interest and a lot of enthusiasm, and we hope you share some of our excitement.
Someday when the team's up against it, the brakes are beating the boys. Ask them to go in there with all they've got. Win just one for the Kipper. I don't know where I'll be then, but I'll know about it. I'll be happy.
Our guest is the former President of the United States, Ronald Reagan. You've had two careers. Not many people have had that either. A full career in one profession, a full career in another. All the time you were in the White House, did you read Variety? Did you keep up with the goings-on out here? Did you stay aware of the business?
Well, I never had a chance at any of the trade papers. I was always interested in what was going on, but I think maybe I could suggest that it was 3 careers, because I started out as a radio sports announcer.
That's right. In fact, we're on the same... You run in Davenport, Iowa, right?
And then over to Des Moines.
Des Moines.
Moved to Des Moines.
So you had 3 careers. But you didn't stay in touch while president with the old career? The old...
Well, as I say, I tried to keep interested, but I never had any access to the trade papers. But I tried to keep up with, what was being made in Hollywood and so forth.
Was there a good comparison between the two, politics and acting? Did you utilize one with the other? I mean, if critics would say you did. Do you feel you did?
Well, I'll have to tell you this one thing. I know that I took an awful lot of abuse when I was running because people said, what is that? Anyone have the nerve to be an actor and think they could be president of the United States? I have to tell you there were a number of times when I thought, could you do that job if you hadn't been an actor?
You had to use it, right? It's a skill.
First of all, just like you have the reviewers that pan your pictures and so forth, and then the constant publicity seeking in that business, well, there's much of that same thing in the business of being president.
There is there's a comparison between the two cities, isn't there? Hollywood and Washington.
And you're familiar with the public and the people and so forth. I think one of the things that probably was a help in the presidency was you can't be an actor without liking people. They're your stock in trade. You are out to please them. And
if you don't please them, you don't make it.
That's right. And so the people are what you're thinking of in the presidency. I told every cabinet member and every staff member that I appointed that I wanted to hear from them without any shading on all of the issues that we faced and the decisions that had to be made. I wanted their thinking on it. But the thing, I said, there's one thing I don't want. I don't want to hear anyone tell me what the political ramifications are of some decision that has to be made. We will discuss it only, is it good or bad for the people?
Bill Casey, the late Bill Casey, told me once at a lunch, if Ronald Reagan has one fault, it's an inability to dress people down. He doesn't fire people well. He can't knock someone down well when they deserve it. Was he right?
Well, I guess there was some right in that. Yes, it is difficult for me to fire someone or to be mean to him in any way.
I mean, you had to do it.
Yes.
But he thought you never liked it.
No.
Some presidents enjoyed it.
Well, no, not me.
And you also don't bear grudges, do you? You seem not to have a meanness.
Well, thank you.
I mean, well, let's take like Donald Reagan. You don't seem to have animosity to it. Your wife has more.
Well, that's in my behalf. She feels a little bit about the same way you are in asking these things and saying these things, but she sometimes thinks that someone's taken advantage of me, and that fires her up more than if they were taking advantage of her.
Yeah, but it doesn't fire you up?
Well, I've sometimes, I've had the staff tell me that they know I'm upset when I throw my glasses.
You've thrown I can't picture that.
Well, yes, sitting at the desk with and throwing them across the desk, the reading glasses and so forth.
Your dander does get up.
Oh, yes.
Coming up, a historic pair who began the end of a historic conflict. Reagan on Gorbachev, when we return.
Mr. President?
I was talking about another time, another era.
We're not just grateful to both you and Mrs. Gorbachev, but want you to know we think of you as friends.
The liking of Gorbachev, was that a real sense of affection? Did you like him?
Yes, I'll have to tell you that, as you know, he was the fourth. There were 3 leaders before him of the Soviet Union, and I didn't have much to do with them. They kept dying on me. But he was totally different than any Russian leader that I had met before. And I have to say, I think that there was a kind of a chemistry there that's set up. Now, on the other hand, I knew too much about communism to believe in words. I said that I would make my decision as to whether we were getting along on the basis of deeds. Every meeting that we ever had, I presented him with a handwritten, my handwriting, list of people that had been brought to my attention who wanted to emigrate and for reasons to get out. And I would give it to him, and in every instance, very shortly, that list, he would have
He came through.
Huh? Yes.
You think he would have been a successful politician in this country? Was he just good at it?
Yes, because I think he is a likable person. You find yourself like him. But again, knowing the difference between our two systems, I'm not a linguist, but I learned one little Russian phrase, and I used it so often that he used to clap his hands over his ears.
Mr. General Secretary, though my pronunciation may give you difficulty, the maxim is, doviai no proviai, trust but verify.
Назначение этого...
На каждой встрече вы это повторяете.
You repeat that at every meeting.
I like it.
Мне нравится.
With all the changes that have occurred in this decade, especially the last year, this incredible year, do you feel a personal sense of accomplishment?
Well, I think that perhaps I had something to do with it because I believe, number one, that in seeking peace with the Soviet Union, it could only be done through strength, not just through words or pleading. And I also believed in the necessity of being frank about how I looked at them and their expansionism and so forth and the things that they were doing and had done here in our own country. And that's why I use some terms like calling it the evil empire and things of that kind.
You think that all paid off?
I think it did, yes. Because in talking about peace and armament, I remember in our first meeting, I said to him that here it was a very unique situation. Here probably were the only 2 men in the world that could start World War III or maybe bring about peace. And I said that I knew we were going to talk about could we reduce arms and weapons. But I said, I have to remember that we don't mistrust each other because we're armed. We're armed because we mistrust each other. So maybe in as much as talking of reducing arms, maybe we should see if we couldn't find out ways to reduce the causes of the mistrust between us.
Well, you did that.
Well, he accepted that, and I think, you see, there's one thing. He had a need for achieving something. He had discovered that he had inherited an economic basket case, and much of that was due to the military buildup. So if he was going to fulfill the responsibilities of his new job, General Secretary of the Soviet Union, he had to find an answer to that basket case, that terrible economic situation where they couldn't provide enough food for their own people.
Mr. Gorbachev and Lithuania.
Well, he's there, of course, because of the desire of those Baltic countries to have their nationalism reinstated. And I think that he has a great opportunity. The only reason that Stalin and the Soviet Union seized those Baltic states was to save them from Hitler. But now there's no Hitler. And it just seems to me he has a great opportunity to call attention of the world to the fact of why they were taken over. And now there is no longer any need. And then restore to them their nationhood.
You think he might do that?
I don't know, but I think it'd be smart if he did.
If he asked your advice, that's what you'd tell him.
Yes.
The Noriega situation. Would you have done what President Bush did? Would you have gone in?
I think on the basis of all that I know about it and all of the facts, you know, I'm not privy to everything now that I'm not there. But yes, I think that the facts as they were, we had tried everything we could domestically and without force before, and we weren't able to move him. And so yes, I think that this is the proper thing.
Do you miss the privy? Do you miss the not being in on the no?
Well, no, because having been there, I know what the situation is, and I know how difficult it would be to try, and even someone like myself who has been there, for them to try and keep me apprised. Now, I must say that they do. I get reports from them, just as I sent reports to the previous presidents. But for making a decision, no, I know how that comes up at such a time.
So you don't personally miss it?
No.
How's, in your opinion, you can be honest now, you don't need the job, how's Dan Quayle doing?
Well, I think Dan Quayle has been badly abused and by much of the media. I think they've ignored looking at his record as a senator. And he has a fine record. And he was looked up to and respected by a great many people. And now this just trying to find every misuse of a word or something, I think he doesn't deserve that.
So he's equating himself well, in your opinion? Is that a tough job?
Oh, sure. Yes, it has to be.
Because all the power depends on what the president gives to him.
Yes, and I think that a vice president has to be aware that there's a limit to what they can say or do because of the presidency. But I have to tell you that, and I think George is doing this same thing with him, when I became governor of California, I had a feeling that the lieutenant governor was a position that had been abused, that it was like letting someone sit on the sidelines in case they were needed in the game. Something happened to the to the player. And so the same thing with the vice presidency. I thought that the vice president, it was a waste of talent unless you used him like, say, the vice president of a corporation. So George was a major part of everything we did.
Ollie North said yesterday, you are the man of the decade. Now, how do you react when I'm sure you heard that. How do you react?
Well, now, I have to admit, that gives you a warm feeling inside to hear someone say that, particularly someone who was around when it was going on.
How do you feel about him?
About Ollie North?
Yeah.
Well, I have difficulty in talking about this situation that he was directly involved in, because it is still before the law and all, and I could create some problems if I made statements.
We got to take a break. Did you personally like him?
Yes, and he had a great military record of courage and certainly of taking care of the men.
Of course, Oliver North was a major figure in the Iran-Contra affair. And in 1989, he was found guilty of obstructing Congress and destroying federal documents. That conviction was later overturned. When we come back, Reagan on politics and politicians.
And anything that we tell about all the things that have been going on in trying to effect this rescue endangers the possibility of further rescues.
The polls show that a lot of American people just simply don't believe you. That the one thing that you've had going for you more than anything else in your presidency, your credibility, has been severely damaged.
I did not know about the diversion of funds. Indeed, I didn't know there were excess funds. Yet the buck does not stop with Admiral Poindexter, as he stated in his testimony.
Tonight we're looking back at a very memorable 1990 interview with Ronald Reagan. One of the biggest thorns in his presidential side was Nicaragua. The fight to restore democracy to that Central American country consumed the administration. In fact, it was the question of how to fund the Contra rebels that led to the Iran-Contra affair. clearly one of the darkest hours of the Reagan presidency. Despite the controversy, the administration stuck to its goal of toppling the Sandinista government. I asked President Reagan if he ever thought this aim would be achieved.
Well, I think we can, but I think some things have to be done. In Nicaragua, the revolution against the dictator, the revolutionaries at one point in that asked that dictator to step down in order to save their lives and stop the killing. And he said, well, what are the revolutionary goals? And, well, incidentally, I'm ahead of myself. They asked the Organization of American States to ask him to do that. And this question then came back, and the Organization of American States asked the revolutionary goals, and they were listed as being everything that we have. Pluralistic society, freedom of the press, all of these things that go for democracy. And these were promised to the Sandinistas. Now, the Sandinista organization has that name because of a Sandini, a man, and it was a communist organization. When he stepped down, the dictator stepped down, and the revolution was over, they were the only really organized group in the revolution. They took over. They even exiled and got rid of some of the other leaders of the revolution. And they have not kept a single promise about this being a democracy.
So you are not optimistic?
Well, I'm optimistic in the belief that if the Organization of American States, if all the other Central American countries and ourselves, if we will ensure that there can be a team to watch this election and not just leave it to the Sandinista government, because then, no, it's not going to happen. But if they are there and can ask it, I have confidence that the people of Nicaragua will vote for democracy.
To Kalamazoo, Michigan, hello.
Hello, Mr. President. You're looking very good, sir.
Well, thank you.
Do you think a black or a woman will ever be elected president? If so, will it be in your lifetime?
Well, I don't know whether it'll be in my lifetime or not. I would hope so, but I think that both things can happen. You only have to look at the progress that has been made already. And one of the things that I could point out right now that I think there should be more in looking for presidential candidates, there should be more looking at governors. For a time in our history, that's where you found the presidents. And I can tell you, having been a governor and having been a president, the only job in the United States that is similar to the presidency, and very similar, is the job of governor.
Is this a statement for the new governor of Virginia?
Well, what I'm saying is we now have had some experience with black governors, with women governors, and we can match them with anyone else. And if we set out to look at the records of governors with their states, we could judge on the basis of what they've done for their state as to what they could do for the nation. Because, as I say, I was surprised as president. In the first 48 hours, I was surprised to realize how undifferent this new job was than what I had done in California.
I know he's not in your party, but are you a little encouraged by the election of a black governor in Virginia? Is this a good sign?
Well,
I know I'm taking you away from partisanship here.
Well, I would like to point out that race should no longer be the consideration. This consideration should be political philosophy. Now, there I have to get into Democrat and Republican. And I've been both in that regard. And I have to ask how many Democrats, if they really pin down the policies of their party, how many of them can still be supportive of them? I didn't really leave the party, I don't think. It left me.
The performer hasn't been provided with a script. As a matter of fact, I have been permitted to choose my own words and discuss my own ideas regarding the choice that we face in the next few weeks. I have spent most of my life as a Democrat. I recently have seen fit to follow another course.
to Santa Rosa, California, with former President Ronald Reagan. Hello.
Hi, Larry King.
Hi.
Hi, President Reagan. I'm so impressed that I got through.
You got through.
Yeah. My daughter, when she was 18 months old, and we were in a poster shop, she saw your face on a Van Heusen shirt commercial, a print ad, and she said, "Oh, there's President Reagan." And all the adults were, like, totally surprised they didn't even recognize you, but she did. Anyway, my question is if you were interested in getting back into show business at all, commercials or movies or TV, and do you watch Falcon Crest?
Fair question.
Fair question. Let me start with the other. I happen to believe that to return to show business, and I loved show business, but I happen to believe that returning to that now would seem as if I was trying to capitalize on the presidency. And besides, now that I'm out, I have some other things that I very seriously believe I should be doing, and I'm trying to do. And that is to get back on the mashed potato circuit, the after lunch and after dinner speaking, and speak up to the people for some of the things that we didn't get done while I was there.
So you're going to continue to be active?
Yes. For example, this country needs a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution.
Well, you've been fighting for that for a long time.
Yes, and it needs the line item veto. 43 governors have it. I had it, where you can pick out of a big hodgepodge bill certain things that are simply costly and are just pork and shouldn't be done, and veto them, and then the legislature would have to override your veto to get them back. Well, I was one of the 43 governors that had that when I was governor of California. I used the line item veto 943 times and was never overridden once. Now, for a president to not have that same authority, and I have to tell you that the Congress, over a great many years, has continued to nibble away at the authority of the president until when I hear some of them accuse me of having the budget deficits. The President of the United States can't spend a dime. Only the Congress can spend money. So who's
now
to blame for
Tip
the
O'Neill mad again. You missed the tipper.
Well,
he misses you.
Well, yes. I must say, Tip was one who kept the politics and the personality separate. In other words, as he once said to me when I caught him saying something pretty rough about me, well, he said, "That's politics, old fella." He said, "Old buddy, after 6 o'clock, we're friends." So every once in a while, when I knew I had a meeting with him, I set my clock ahead to 6 o'clock.
You want to answer the Falcon Crest question? It was asked. She asked if you watched that show.
I don't know that I've had time to watch that so much.
No.
No, other than the news and trying to follow the news, I can't say that...
Do you watch films a lot?
Sometimes I like to turn to that channel that puts on the old ones, just in case they might be putting on one of mine.
Do you watch it?
Do
you watch yourself?
If I see the movie and think it'd be interesting, and because I'm surprised to learn how many movies I didn't see.
Really?
But yeah, you'd think living in Hollywood, and then suddenly you see a movie and say, "I remember that title and all, but I never saw that."
I like the one you did with Nancy, the Navy one.
Oh,
that was a good film.
Well,
I like that movie. See that a lot.
That was from a book written by Admiral Nimitz, and it was about an operation that took place in World War II, in which a whole flotilla of our submarines went into the Sea of Japan, went to the bottom, and laid there until a signal to come up, and then they came up to virtually wipe out the Japanese merchant marine, which was getting the supplies for Japan from the mainland, from China. And it was a very successful
What was the title of that
operation. Well, the title of the book was Operation Hellcat. But the studio decided to change the name to Hellcats of the Navy.
Yeah.
And I thought they should have stuck with the first title.
Hellcats of the Navy was released in 1957. It was the only movie the future president and first lady made together. Ahead, Mr. Reagan on famous voyages and favorite actors.
How do you know so much about the moon?
I know a lot about it. I spend all my time looking at it when you're away. That's how it still is with me, Case.
It's time for me to go now.
Gorbachev, open this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Now, you can't tell me you figured that would happen.
Well, I meant what I said when I said tear it down. You know, it was such a, how would we feel if you wanted to put a wall down the Mississippi River from Canada to the Gulf?
Do you think they're going to unify that country?
I don't know, but I do believe it's up to them. And I don't think there should be too much interference from the outside with them.
How did you react to the criticism of the Japan appearance and the fee?
Well,
I don't think I heard your reaction. Now,
No,
Nancy said she did a lot more than just 2 speeches.
Yes. As a matter
Your
of
reaction?
fact, well, we were there 9 days. And Nancy managed to set up an anti-drug program as she has in this country. I felt that in going to Japan, I could help in bringing about a closer relationship. And I was amazed at how much the Japanese people want to be a friend of the United States.
Do you understand, though, why people were angered or upset about getting a fee for it?
Well, not when I realized that an actor before me, they have a different system and approach to things. I didn't ask for that. I didn't set a fee or anything.
You didn't?
No, they offered this. But an actor that I happen to know of from here, he received $3 million just for doing a spot ad on television for an automobile company. $3 million. And
so in other words, you didn't request this fee, they offered this fee.
that's right, that was the offer.
Tarzana, California, for Ronald Reagan. Hello.
Hello, Mr. President. As a political science student, it is indeed an honor to talk to you. My question is, do you believe that the campaign Bush conducted in 1988 involving Willie Horton and Boston Harbor, did you feel was a little too negative, too personal? And how do you feel about negative ads in general?
Well, I think that he was goaded into this. And I think it was a case of trying to remind the people that Massachusetts, first of all, their own people were calling it Taxachusetts, and many people were moving across a state line to live in another state because of their tax.
You don't
program.
think it was at all dirty on?
And, well, I think you have to realize what the other man is saying, including your response. It isn't just an open attack on someone who has not opened the subject himself. But I think, yes, to hold with a program in which a man is freed and then goes out and commits dastardly deeds and against his fellow human beings.
It's fair game.
Yes.
Oslo, Norway. Hello.
Hello.
What time is it in Norway?
What?
What time is it?
Oh, it's nearly 4 o'clock in the morning.
Wow, 4 o'clock in the morning. Wow. What's your question?
I wonder very much about, has it ever, during your time of presidency, been a chance of nuclear war between Soviet Union and America, or, I mean...
Good question. Were we ever close?
I don't think so, because while I disagreed with the policy that was called the MAD policy, M-A-D, it at least had seen both countries armed to the point that neither one wanted to take the risk of starting that war because each of us knew how well armed we were. But I did feel that we could not keep on doing that, and it was a foolish policy. And so when the opportunity came to get an intermediate range treaty on the weapons, the missiles that the Soviet Union had aimed at the cities of Europe, and we in NATO were asked to give NATO something to counter that, and we did. The Pershing missiles and the cruise missiles started, and the Soviet Union protested. Well, that led then to a meeting, and thank heaven, a meeting with Gorbachev, where I said, well, the answer then is 0-0. You get rid of yours and we'll get rid of ours.
But we were never close to conflict in your 8 years.
I don't think so, no.
President Reagan took a two-pronged approach to defense. On one hand, under his administration, U.S. defense spending reached its highest level since the Korean War. Reagan also envisioned the Star Wars missile defense program. A scaled-down version of that ambitious plan is still in the testing phase. On the other hand, Reagan signed the INF Treaty, which eliminated intermediate-range nuclear missiles, the first treaty ever that actually reduced the number of warheads in both the East and West arsenals. The START Treaty also had its origins during the Reagan era. It finally was signed in 1992 and led to a 30 to 40% reduction in nuclear warheads. Our final moments with President Reagan after this.
I said, look, I know all the rules about saluting and civilian clothes and all, but if I'm the commander-in-chief, there ought to be a regulation that would permit me to return a salute.
Iraq.
In a world of nausea and fear and tension, the trip to the beaches begins.
Men who stormed the beaches as youngsters, but who can no longer walk. These aging heroes know that this may be the last time they see the site of their greatest triumph.
She will never forget that 6th of June, 1944, the day hope was reborn and rekindled.
And our GIs had a saying, the only way home is through Berlin.
If we don't remember our history, we won't know where we're going.
What we did wasn't done in vain. It was done for a reason, and I think we did as good as a job as we possibly could do.
You did, as you say, as good as you could. You did everything for us, and we thank you.
We are running out of time. A couple of other things. AIDS. Were we late on that?
I don't think, no, certainly we were not unnecessarily so. It was a plain case of catching up with things, and I immediately appointed a commission to get into the whole problem of AIDS and come back with the recommendations of what we could and should be doing.
Do you think Rock Hudson focused a lot of our attention on it?
Well, I think that brought a lot of attention to it.
Did you know him well?
Well, I knew him as we knew each other in Hollywood, as fellow actors and all, but not more than that.
Are you hopeful about it?
Well, yes, I think we have to be hopeful about it, or we'll find ourselves back in those days of the plagues that wiped out millions of people.
Sandusky, Ohio, for Ronald Reagan. Hello.
Hi, real quick, Ron, I just want to tell you I love you, and I just want to know what your favorite actor or actress was that you worked with, and I wish you could run again for many more years.
Well...
Not a bad call.
Thank you for your call, and appreciate it, and obviously I have to tell you that my opportunity to act with an actress, Nancy Davis...
Didn't turn out too bad.
She was a nurse and I was a naval officer and so forth, and we went home together because we were married.
Stay well.
All right.
Thank you. You've been watching a very special interview we did with Ronald Reagan in January of 1990. It was a privilege and a pleasure to talk with the former president. Our thoughts and prayers are with Nancy and the rest of the family at this very sad time. I'm Larry King. Good night.
Friends, we did it. We weren't just marking time. We made a difference. We made the city stronger